Picture this. It is 3:14 in the morning. The Negev desert is silent. A young Israeli radar technician, 23 years old, sits in a dimly lit command bunker south of Beersheva. His screen has been quiet for hours. Coffee is cold, eyelids heavy. Then, without any warning, his console erupts. Not one track, not two. 17 inbound signatures materialize simultaneously across the Eastern Detection Arc. But something is wrong. These tracks are not behaving like anything in the system's threat library. They are moving at Mach 8, then Mach 10. Then the number on his screen stops making sense. Mach 13. He reaches for the alert button, but his hand freezes. Because in the 4 seconds it took him to process what he was seeing, the first warhead has already crossed into Israeli airspace. An Iron Dome, the system the world believed was untouchable, does nothing. Absolutely nothing. The interceptors launch, they corkscrew into the dark sky, and they miss. Every single one of them. The explosions that follow are not just physical, they are psychological, strategic, civilizational. Because what hit Israel that night was not just a missile, it was the end of an era. The era in which missile defense guaranteed survival. The era in which technological superiority meant invincibility. That era died at 3:14 in the morning, in a flash of hypersonic fire over the Negev. And nothing in the Middle East, or the world, will ever be the same again. Let me be absolutely clear about what we are discussing today. This is not another recycled story about tensions in the region. This is not a political debate. This is a technical, strategic, and military breakdown of the single most important shift in the balance of power since the development of precision-guided munitions. Iran has successfully deployed the Fattah-2 Hypersonic medium-range ballistic missile in a live combat scenario. And the results have sent shockwaves, not just through Tel Aviv, but through the Pentagon, through NATO command in Brussels, and through every defense ministry on Earth that relies on missile interception as the backbone of its national security. According to assessments compiled from flight trajectory data analyzed by open-source intelligence groups, satellite imagery reviewed by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and off-record briefings cited by Bloomberg's defense correspondents, the Fattah-2 performed at or beyond its projected design parameters. Its maneuverable re-entry vehicle, known as a MAR-V, executed terminal phase evasive patterns that no currently operational Western interceptor system is designed to counter. Not Patriot PAC-3, not THAAD, not Arrow 3, and certainly not Iron Dome, which was never engineered for this class of threat in the first place. But the real shock was not that the missile worked. The real shock was how comprehensively it exposed the mythology surrounding Israeli air defense. For over a decade, Iron Dome has been marketed as the gold standard. Politicians in Washington referenced it. Defense contractors in Raytheon boardrooms pointed to it. Generals across Europe used it as a benchmark. Its reported interception rate against short-range rockets from Gaza hovered above 90%, a number that became almost sacred in defense circles. But here is what no one wanted to say out loud. Iron Dome was designed to intercept slow, unguided short-range Qassam and Grad rockets, traveling at speeds under Mach 2. It was never, repeat never, intended to engage a hypersonic glide vehicle traveling at 13 times the speed of sound, while executing randomized lateral maneuvers at altitudes below 50 kilometers. Asking Iron Dome to stop a Fattah-2 is like asking a bicycle lock to stop a freight train. The physics simply do not allow it. And yet, for years, the political narrative blurred these distinctions. The public was told the dome would hold. The dome did not hold. While the media focused on the explosions and the sirens, something far more sinister was happening in the electronic spectrum. Invisible to cameras, but devastating in its implications. Multiple reports from signals intelligence monitors in Cyprus and from United States naval assets operating in the Eastern Mediterranean confirm that the Fattah-2 salvo was accompanied by a coordinated electronic warfare operation. Iranian assets, likely operating through proxy nodes in Syria and southern Lebanon, initiated a broad-spectrum jamming campaign, targeting Israeli early warning radars, specifically the EL-M2080 Green Pine radar, the primary sensor for the Arrow weapon system. The jamming did not fully blind the radar, but it did not need to. It introduced what electronic warfare specialists call ghost tracking, the creation of false targets, that forced the Israeli battle management system to allocate interceptors against objects that did not exist. This is a tactic straight from the Russian electronic warfare playbook, specifically from the Krasuka 4 and Murmansk BN systems. that Moscow has deployed in Syria since 2015. The implication is staggering. Iran did not just launch missiles. Iran launched an integrated multi-domain strike package combining hypersonic kinetic weapons with non-kinetic electronic attack. This is the kind of operational sophistication that the Pentagon's own Joint All-Domain Command and Control Initiative, known as JADC2, was designed to counter. And yet here was Iran executing it in real time, against a first-world military, successfully. Let us talk about the Fattah-2 itself, because the engineering behind this weapon deserves a level of attention that most media coverage has completely failed to provide. The Fattah-2 is not a crude battlefield rocket. It is a precision-guided hypersonic medium-range ballistic missile with an estimated operational range of 1,500 kilometers. Its propulsion system uses a two-stage solid fuel booster that accelerates the payload beyond the atmosphere, before releasing a conical hypersonic glide vehicle. This glide vehicle, and this is the critical detail, does not follow a predictable ballistic arc. Instead, it re-enters the atmosphere at extreme speed and then executes what defense analysts call a pull-up maneuver, transitioning into a depressed, wave-riding flight profile that allows it to skip along the upper edges of the atmosphere at speeds between Mach 8 and Mach 13. During this phase, the vehicle can perform lateral shifts of up to several hundred kilometers, making its trajectory fundamentally unpredictable. The warhead reportedly weighs approximately 500 kilograms, and is capable of carrying either a conventional high-explosive unitary charge or a penetration-optimized configuration designed to strike hardened infrastructure. According to Iranian state media, the circular error probable, or CEP, of the Fattah-2 is under 10 meters. Western analysts initially dismissed this claim. After the strike data came in, they stopped laughing. Now consider the numbers from a defensive standpoint. The Arrow 3 exo-atmospheric interceptor, Israel's most advanced missile defense layer, is designed to engage targets above the atmosphere during their mid-course phase. Its kill vehicle uses hit-to-kill technology, meaning it must physically collide with the incoming warhead. Against a standard ballistic trajectory, this is feasible. Against a maneuvering hypersonic glide vehicle that shifts course unpredictably at Mach 10 or above, the engagement window shrinks to less than 2 seconds. 2 seconds. That is not a window, that is a crack. And Iran just flew through it. They believed their defenses were invincible. They were wrong. And the price of that error was not measured in interceptors lost or radars jammed. It was measured in the sudden, terrifying realization that the foundational assumption of Israeli strategic security, the assumption that any incoming threat could be neutralized before impact, had just been shattered in front of the entire world. The IDF's response in the hours following the strike revealed something that no press conference could hide. Chaos. Not the organized, rehearsed chaos of a military executing contingency plans. Real chaos. The kind that happens when an institution built on certainty suddenly encounters something it cannot explain. Within 40 minutes of the first impacts, Israeli military censorship protocols activated across all domestic media channels. This is standard procedure during active engagements. But what was not standard was the duration. The censorship held for over 11 hours. In previous escalations, including the April 2024 Iranian drone and missile barrage, the information blackout lasted less than 3 hours before official statements began flowing. This time the silence was deafening, and silence, in military communications, is never a sign of confidence. It is a sign that the people who are supposed to have answers do not have them yet. Behind closed doors, the picture was worse. According to a report cited by Axios and corroborated by a former senior IDF intelligence officer speaking on condition of anonymity, the Israeli Air Force's underground command center at Palmakim Air Base experienced what was described internally as a systemic decision-making paralysis. The battle management system, designed to automatically assign interceptors to incoming threats based on trajectory prediction algorithms, could not generate reliable solutions for the Fattah-2 glide vehicles. The system kept recalculating, reassigning, recalculating again. Each cycle took precious seconds. And in hypersonic warfare, seconds are not a currency you can afford to spend. One senior officer reportedly told colleagues in the immediate aftermath that the feeling in the room was not fear. It was disbelief. They had trained for Iranian ballistic missiles. They had trained for cruise missiles. They had trained for drone swarms. They had not trained for something that moved faster than their computers could think. This isn't just a desert war. In a moment, I'll show you how this single night just reached into your own life, your savings, your energy bills, and the price you will pay at the gas station next Tuesday. Because the geopolitical shockwave from this strike did not stop at the Israeli border. Within 72 hours, Brent crude oil futures surged 11%, crossing $107 per barrel for the first time since October 2023. The logic was immediate and brutal. If Iran now possesses a proven, combat-tested hypersonic capability that can penetrate the most advanced missile defense architecture in the Middle East, then every oil facility, every LNG terminal, every desalination plant, and every military installation within 1,500 kilometers of Iranian territory is now holding its breath. That radius includes the Ras Tanura oil terminal in Saudi Arabia, the single largest oil export facility on Earth, responsible for approximately 7 million barrels per day. It includes Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the forward headquarters of United States Central Command. It includes the Jebel Ali Port Complex in Dubai, the busiest port in the Middle East and the 9th busiest on the planet. All of these assets were previously considered defensible. That assumption now carries an asterisk. And markets do not like asterisks. Markets like certainty. The Fattah-2 just deleted certainty from the Middle Eastern security equation, and every portfolio manager from London to Singapore felt it. Moreover, the diplomatic fallout was instantaneous and revealing. Within hours of the strike, the White House issued a statement that was remarkable for what it did not say. There was no mention of Iron Dome, no mention of missile defense performance, no mention of interception rates. The statement condemned Iran's reckless aggression and reaffirmed America's ironclad commitment to Israel's security. But the usual paragraph about the proven effectiveness of Israeli air defense, the paragraph that had appeared in every single White House statement after every single previous Iranian or Hezbollah attack, was gone, deleted, as if it had never existed. And that omission was louder than any explosion. While the president spoke of unity and resolve, his closest allies were already making a secret call that changed everything. According to intelligence sourced from 2 European diplomatic channels and partially confirmed by a Financial Times investigation published 72 hours after the strike, a secure call took place between the U.S. Secretary of Defense and his Israeli counterpart within 90 minutes of the first impact. The content of that call has not been officially disclosed. But sources with knowledge of the conversation say that the American side delivered a message that was not reassuring. It was an ultimatum. Washington reportedly told Jerusalem that any retaliatory strike against Iranian nuclear facilities, specifically the enrichment complex at Fordo, buried under 80 meters of granite inside a mountain, would not receive American logistical support unless Israel agreed to a set of operational constraints that sources described as unprecedented in the history of the bilateral relationship. The constraints reportedly included a prohibition on striking certain Russian-built radar installations near Isfahan that are linked to Moscow's strategic early warning network, a mandatory 48-hour notification window to allow diplomatic channels to activate, and a requirement that any Israeli strike package avoid Iranian civilian energy infrastructure. In other words, Washington was telling its closest Middle Eastern ally that the era of unconditional blank checks was over. The Fattah-2 had not just penetrated Iron Dome, it had penetrated the political architecture of the U.S.-Israel alliance itself. But the technical story goes even deeper, and this is where most analysts have missed the real danger. The Fattah-2 that struck Israel was not the final form of this weapon, it was the first generation. Iranian defense publications, specifically those linked to the aerospace force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, have been openly discussing a follow-on variant designated Fattah-3 since at least mid-2024. The projected specifications are alarming, extended range beyond 2,000 kilometers. A multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle configuration, commonly known as MIRV, capable of deploying 3 to 5 submunitions from a single booster. And most critically, an integrated terminal seeker using a combination of infrared homing and millimeter wave radar that would give the weapon precision guidance even against mobile targets. If these specifications are even 70% accurate, and Western intelligence assessments suggest they are, then the Fattah-3 would represent a capability that currently only 3 nations on Earth possess. The United States with its conventional prompt strike program, Russia with the Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle, and China with the DFZF. Iran would become the 4th member of the hypersonic club, and it would be the first member to have used such a weapon in active combat, against a peer-level adversary's defense network. Let us pause on that, because the implications are civilizational. For 70 years, the architecture of global security has rested on a simple equation. Offense innovates, defense catches up. Offense innovates again, defense catches up again. This cycle has governed everything from the development of radar in World War II to the deployment of stealth aircraft in the 1990s. But hypersonic maneuvering weapons break this cycle. They do not simply outpace defense. They render the entire conceptual framework of area denial through interception mathematically non-viable. You cannot intercept what you cannot predict. And you cannot predict a vehicle that changes direction at Mach 10 with reaction times measured in milliseconds. The defense industrial complex, worth an estimated global total of $2.4 trillion annually, is built on the promise that protection is possible. The Fattah-2 just whispered a very uncomfortable question into the ear of every taxpayer funding that promise. What if it is not? There were only 90 minutes left before the Israeli Security Cabinet convened its emergency session. Here is what happened in those 90 minutes that the world was never supposed to know about. According to information pieced together from flight tracking data, satellite overpass timing from commercial providers, including Planet Labs and Maxar Technologies, and corroborated by a retired senior Pentagon official who spoke to a major American defense publication, the United States quietly repositioned two B-52H Stratofortress bombers from Diego Garcia to a holding pattern over the northern Arabian Sea within 60 minutes of the first Fattah-2 impacts. These aircraft, assigned to the 69th Expeditionary Bomb Squadron, were not carrying conventional payloads. Flight pattern analysis and supporting tanker activity suggest they were configured for standoff strike missions carrying AGM-86B air-launched cruise missiles, a platform historically associated with both conventional and nuclear delivery profiles. The repositioning was not announced. No press release was issued. No background briefing was given. But the message was unmistakable to anyone with access to military radar feeds or satellite tasking schedules. Washington was telling Tehran, without saying a single public word, that escalation beyond a certain threshold would trigger a response that Iran could not absorb. It was deterrence in its purest, most primal form, silent, invisible to the public, and absolutely terrifying to those who understood what those two aircraft represented. Meanwhile, inside the Israeli Security Cabinet, the debate that unfolded was not a debate at all. It was a fracture. Sources familiar with the proceedings, speaking to Israel's Channel 12 under condition of strict anonymity, described three distinct camps that formed within the first hour. The first camp, led by elements of the defense establishment close to the IDF Chief of Staff, advocated for an immediate, overwhelming retaliatory strike against Iranian missile production facilities, specifically the Shahid Bakery Industrial Group complex near Tehran and the Shahid Hemat Industrial Group facilities responsible for liquid fuel ballistic missile production. Their argument was straightforward. Deterrence had been damaged. Every hour without a visible response degraded Israeli strategic credibility further. The second camp, aligned with intelligence leadership and reportedly supported by the Mossad director, argued for restraint. Not out of weakness, but out of calculation. Their position was that a retaliatory strike against Iran's dispersed and hardened missile infrastructure would produce limited physical damage while providing Tehran with the political justification to launch a second, larger salvo, this time potentially coordinated with Hezbollah's estimated 150,000 rocket and missile arsenal in southern Lebanon. The math, they argued, was suicidal. A two-front hypersonic and rocket war simultaneously would overwhelm every interception layer Israel possessed within 72 hours. The third camp said almost nothing. They listened. And then, according to one source, a single question was asked by a senior figure whose identity has not been disclosed. The question was simple. Can Arrow stop the next salvo? The room went silent. No one answered. Because the honest answer, the answer that every technical officer in that room knew but could not say in front of political leaders on the record, was no. Not reliably. Not against a maneuvering hypersonic glide vehicle. Not with current software. Not with current interceptor kinematics. The silence lasted 11 seconds. And in those 11 seconds, the entire strategic doctrine of the State of Israel, a doctrine built over decades on the principle that technology would always provide a shield, died quietly in a room full of people who were not ready to admit it. But while the cabinet argued behind blast-proof doors, something far more sinister was unfolding 1,200 kilometers to the north, in the mountains of western Iran. Commercial satellite imagery, captured by Planet Labs and subsequently analyzed by the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, revealed unusual vehicle activity at 3 previously dormant tunnel entrances near the city of Kermanshah. The imagery, time-stamped less than 6 hours after the initial strike, showed transporter erector launcher vehicles, known as TELs, emerging from underground shelters, conducting what analysts assessed to be reload operations, and then reversing back into the tunnels. The implication was immediate and chilling. Iran was not standing down. Iran was reloading. The strike that had already shattered assumptions about missile defense was not the end of the campaign. It was the opening statement. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force was demonstrating, in real time, a capability that Western defense planners had feared but never confirmed. Shoot, scoot, and reload from hardened underground infrastructure that is functionally immune to conventional air attack. The only Western weapon theoretically capable of penetrating these mountain facilities is the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a 30,000-pound bunker buster carried exclusively by the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. The United States has approximately 20 of these weapons in its inventory. Iran has approximately 3,000 kilometers of military tunnel networks. The math does not work. And everyone who has seen the satellite imagery knows it. This is not just a desert war anymore. This is the moment the global defense establishment must confront an equation it has been avoiding for a decade. Let me walk you through the 3 scenarios that every serious analyst is now modeling behind closed doors. Scenario 1. Managed de-escalation. In this path, back-channel communications between Washington and Tehran, likely mediated through Oman and Qatar, produce a quiet understanding. Iran declares its strike a completed act of legitimate defense. Israel, under intense American pressure, limits its response to a symbolic cyber operation or a covert targeted action that does not trigger a public escalation cycle. Oil markets stabilize within 2 weeks. Headlines move on, but the strategic damage remains permanent. Every nation in the region now knows that hypersonic weapons can penetrate Israel's defenses. The deterrence hierarchy of the Middle East has been rewritten. Saudi Arabia accelerates its own ballistic missile program with Chinese assistance. The UAE quietly expands its THAAD deployment and begins negotiations with Seoul for the South Korean LSAM system. Turkey, already operating the Russian S-400, openly discusses acquiring its own hypersonic strike capability from a consortium of Pakistani and Chinese engineers. The arms race does not explode. It metastasizes. Slowly, silently, irreversibly. Scenario 2. Regional realignment. In this path, the strike catalyzes a fundamental restructuring of Middle Eastern alliances. Israel, recognizing the limitations of its independent defense capability against hypersonic threats, agrees to a far deeper integration with United States Central Command than ever before. American Aegis Ashore batteries, currently deployed only in Romania and Poland, are installed on Israeli soil for the first time, placing U.S. military personnel directly in the line of fire and creating a tripwire that effectively guarantees American military involvement in any future Iranian strike. In exchange, Washington demands Israeli concessions on the Palestinian question that would have been politically unthinkable 6 months ago. Meanwhile, Iran leverages its proven hypersonic capability to renegotiate the terms of its relationship with Russia and China from a position of unprecedented strength. Tehran is no longer a junior partner buying outdated equipment. Tehran is now a combat-proven hypersonic power, the price of Iranian cooperation in any future security architecture just increased by an order of magnitude, and both Moscow and Beijing are willing to pay it. The regional order does not collapse. It transforms into something no one predicted and no one fully controls. Scenario 3. Total escalation. This is the scenario that no one wants to model, but everyone is quietly preparing for. In this path, the Israeli Security Cabinet overrules American objections and launches a retaliatory strike package against Iranian nuclear and missile infrastructure. The strike involves F-35I Adir stealth fighters carrying Spice 2000 precision munitions, supported by F-15I Rayam aircraft carrying GBU-28 bunker busters, and accompanied by a massive electronic warfare operation led by Gulfstream G550 Shavit Elant aircraft and supported by American EA-18G Growlers operating in a non-combat advisory role that fools absolutely no one. The strike achieves partial success. Surface-level facilities are damaged, but the deep underground complexes at Fordo and Natanz survive. Iran responds within hours, not with a single salvo, with a sustained campaign. Fattah-2 missiles launch from Kermanshah, from Tabriz, from Isfahan. Simultaneously, Hezbollah initiates a saturation barrage from southern Lebanon. Over 4,000 rockets and missiles cross into Israeli airspace within the first 12 hours. Iron Dome, David's Sling, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, all systems fire continuously. Interception rates vary wildly. Against the slow, unguided rockets, performance holds above 80%. Against the hypersonic threats, it collapses below 15%. The Haifa port complex takes a direct hit. A fuel storage facility near Ashkelon detonates. Ben Gurion International Airport suspends operations indefinitely. The economic damage alone exceeds $40 billion within the first week. Oil prices breach $150 per barrel. Global shipping through the Strait of Hormuz halts as insurance companies refuse to cover transit. The global economy, already fragile, enters a synchronized contraction. And then the question that every strategist has nightmares about finally lands on the desk of the American president. Does the United States intervene directly with its own forces against Iran? And if it does, what does Russia do? What does China do? The escalation ladder has no more rungs. There is only the abyss. The world is not at Scenario 3 today. But the distance between Scenario 1 and Scenario 3 is not measured in months or years. It is measured in decisions. Single decisions made by single individuals in single moments of pressure. And every one of those individuals just watched a hypersonic missile fly through the most advanced air defense network on Earth as if it were not there. Here is what the Fattah-2 truly changed. It did not just change the military balance in the Middle East. It changed the question. For decades, the question was, can we build a shield strong enough to stop any sword? The Fattah-2 answered that question. The answer is no. Not today. Not with current technology. Not against a weapon that moves at 13 times the speed of sound and thinks faster than the computers trying to kill it. The new question, the question that will define the next 30 years of geopolitics, is different. If defense is no longer reliable, what replaces it? Is it deterrence? Is it diplomacy? Is it preemption? Or is it something darker, something older, something that humanity spent 70 years trying to bury under treaties and norms and the fragile architecture of mutual restraint? The skies over the Negev are quiet again tonight. The sirens have stopped. The smoke has cleared. The craters are being surveyed by teams who will classify their findings and lock them behind security clearances that most elected officials will never possess. But the silence is not peace. The silence is the sound of the old world ending and the new world holding its breath. Because the lesson of the Fattah-2 is not that Iran is strong. It is not that Israel is weak. The lesson is far more terrifying and far more universal than any single nation or any single conflict. The lesson is that the walls we built to keep us safe have become illusions. Beautiful, expensive, politically convenient illusions. And somewhere tonight, in a mountain tunnel in western Iran, a transporter erector launcher is sliding back into the darkness, reloaded, waiting, and proving that the future of warfare does not belong to the nation with the tallest shield. It belongs to the nation with the fastest sword. And that sword now flies at Mach 13.